In this installment of my series looking at each Halo novel, I'm looking at the 14th through 19th books, where we head even deeper down the Halo rabbit hole into the novels released between 2014 and 2016. Now don't click off yet, because I know when you hear that I'm starting off on number 14, you think you're probably better off to start at the beginning, but that may not be true for you. From this point forward, and arguably since 2011, there is no main series for the Halo books. You just need to find which characters and premises interest you enough to read about, and that's what I'm here to help you do. What distinguishes these 6 books from the Forerunner and Kilo 5 trilogies from 2011 to 2014 are 2 things. First is that the publisher of the books changed from Tor to Gallery Books, at least in North America, and second is that there's no longer any 1 or 2 primary story threads to these novels. 343 just hired a bunch of authors, and they mostly wrote their own stories. Now there are some sequels and trilogies going forward, but because there are so many other books being released before and after, it's hard to organize them by plotline instead of talking about them in release order. Because of this, it's even harder to find which of these books you'd want to read or understand how they fit in with the rest of the Halo books in canon. That is why I am giving a mini review on each of these novels, including the main plot setup, how they relate to other Halo media, as well as some strengths and weaknesses, with my goal being to help you find which of these now 30 Halo novels you'd like to read. I figure watching a 20-minute video is a small preparation to make before investing $20 and 10 plus hours of your time on a book that may not end up interesting you. Just like last time, I'll reveal more plot points than the back of the book does, keeping it to events and revelations from approximately the first half of each story. In my last video, there were some cases where I need to provide light spoilers from a book's ending to discuss its sequel, but aside from the anthology book Fractures, there are no sequels here. So you don't feel lost, let me catch you up on where the universe left off with the last few books without spoiling any huge revelations. First, the Forerunner trilogy, about the Forerunner born stellar makes eternal lasting. The Didact, the Librarian, and the ancient human Chickass ended with the Forerunners being unable to come up with an effective strategy to fight the Flood, both because the Forerunner leaders, who can't agree on a survival strategy, are getting desperate, and the Flood may have evolved specifically to be a killer to the Foreigners. So, it's a losing battle, and they fire the 7 Halo rings from the Ark, which is floating outside the Milky Way galaxy, outside of range of the Halo Ray's weapons, resulting in every Forerunner and sentient being still in the galaxy, including Flood, being killed. This is except for the reseeding supply of many life forms, including humans, San Shayum, and many other species, being sent back to the planets to start life anew. Then, the Didact is sent to Requiem to hibernate in his cryptum indefinitely because he was the hardest to deal with among the Forerunner leaders. Fast forward to 2553, the Human Covenant War is over, the Covenant is disbanded, and the Master Chief's trip back from the Ark messed up, so he's in cryosleep in who knows where until Cortana decides to wake him up. The Arbiter makes it back and becomes the leader of a species on their home planet, Sanghelios. Then, the remaining Spartan 2s and 3s, including Blue Team, are rescued from being stranded on Onyx. Dr. Halsey is arrested for her crimes as the mastermind of the Spartan 2 program, where they kidnap children, and the Office of Naval Intelligence sends the head of ONI, Saren Osman, leading a team of Black Ops called Kilo 5 to start a civil war on Sanghelios, the Arbiter's planet. Along the way, Kilo 5 captures the elite Julam Dama, who is on the side fighting against the Arbiter, and they send him to an ONI prison on Onyx, where he stumbles across Forerunner texts telling of the existence of Requiem and the Didact sleeping there. This gives him the motivation to escape, spend the next few years building up forces, and head to Requiem with the Covenant forces you see in Halo 4. Back on Sanghelios, a big former Covenant warship is stolen in the middle of the Civil War fighting and ends up in the hands of an anti-Earth terrorist who also happens to be the father of Kilo 5's resident Spartan 2, Naomi 0 and 0. Kilo 5 has to stop her father from using the ship for anything crazy. They succeed, and Saren Osman gets promoted between books to be the head of ONI. That's the book story so far, and though I've explained those to you, I am assuming you know at least the basic story of the Halo games, especially Halo 4 and Halo 5 Guardians, when I'm explaining these books. I've put up 2 links to recaps for those games, so feel free to leave and come back if you need to. Now, on to the book reviews. Unlike its marketing suggests, Halo Broken Circle is not about the origins of the Covenant, but the formation does come as some early exposition. The closest part of this book's events to that formation is the first chapter, where we get some perspective on a Sangheli-San Shayum war, but there's a time skip to when the war is over and treaties are signed by the second chapter. It's also split into 2 halves, one taking place during the early days of the Covenant, where the newly formed Covenant that has only 2 species, the Sangheli and San Shayum, or elites and prophets, with the second half showing the conflicting sides of the Covenant schism in mid-Halo 2. In both halves, it shows the 2 sides of each conflict, making 4 total perspectives, with only 2 at a time. The first half follows Maken Skray Aben, the Prophet of Inner Conviction, hundreds of years before the events of the Halo games, in his quest to hunt down the leader of an anti-Covenant elite group led by a Sangheli named Usa Zalis. Usa and his group of followers don't have a formal name or cause, because although he used to be a military commander in his species' war against the San Shayum, he and his because people just want to be left alone now, and luckily, they find the perfect tool for that, a shield world. So, McKen has in large part met his match, and needs to hunt down Usa and whatever Forerunner relics he's protecting from the Covenant. The second half takes place in 2552 during Halo 2, and follows Zoe Reskin, the Prophet of Clarity who spends his time studying Covenant history, and while he investigates the recent events of the Covenant, he starts to question the quick changes that are coming about after the High Prophet of Regret was assassinated by the demon. As that's happening, he starts to see some of the injustices taking place against the Sangheili, such as brutal torturing. But he has friends on both sides of the conflict and is split in his interests. The perspective flips between him and a current descendant of Usa, whose clan is still living, but in a very different situation from where they last interacted with the Covenant. I don't want to reveal too much beyond that, but let me reassure you that the sudden time skip does result in a plot that you could say comes full circle. Even though this book isn't exactly the origins of the Covenant, it's close. There is a good amount of exposition as to why the conflict happened and why the Sangheili lost. Basically, the two species evolved on worlds with Forerunner ruins, and the Sanshayun freely took apart that technology and reverse engineered it for their benefit. On the other side, the Sangheili believe that the relics and ruins should be worshipped but never tampered with. So when the two species meet and the Sanshayun want to take advantage of some technology that the Sangheili insist on protecting, war breaks out. And if I were to tell you that one species was using Forerunner technology and the other one wasn't, which one do you think would win in a war? There is so much world building and exposition for the Covenant in this book. Unlike the Kilo 5 trilogy, where Karen Travis often used human expressions and idioms to offer the perspective of aliens, this book starts from scratch and realizes those mannerisms, customs, and history, like how the Sanshayun do have a homeworld, but many of them boarded the Forerunner keyship and left for the stars. So the ones who are in the Covenant and the ones on the planet are essentially two different factions. And because the ones who left for the stars were mostly male, from an exclusive community, they go back to kidnap females from communities on their home planet so they can have genetically diverse children without birth defects. I loved this book. It's got some good action, it's tense, and it's got exciting characters. If you liked Halo Cryptum, I'd recommend it just because it has a similar feeling of being immersed in an alien culture with its own customs, history, and technology. In comparison to that book, this one focuses less on the tech side and more on the mannerisms, customs, and communications, which I greatly enjoyed. I'd also recommend it to anyone who enjoyed the Covenant plotlines of Halo 2 and 3 because you get a ton more character development, exposition, and some interesting perspectives on the schism. Halo New Blood is a fragmented story told by Gunnery Sergeant Edward Buck from Halo 3 ODST. He explains what happens to his squad named Alpha 9 after the events of that game and throughout the post-war era. We know that in Halo 5 he reappears as a Spartan 4 without the rest of his squad, and this book answers the questions of how he came into that circumstance. It turns out Alpha 9 had a rough run after the war, and this book explains it all. Buck, who was a one-dimensional character before, gets fleshed out a lot here. He's still the no-man, left-behind leader, and you get a taste of why and how that pushes him to his limits when he gets put in situations that are even more intense than the events of the game. It's very enjoyable for a Halo fan, and you can hear Nathan Fillion's voice in your head as you go through the pages. It's also on the shorter side at about 195 pages compared to Halo's usual 350, making it a lot easier to jump into. I'll keep my explanation here short because I think there's little I can say to influence whether you'll want to read this one or not. Do you want more Buck, Alpha 9, Virgil, or Sadie from the audio logs of that game? Do you want a story that's shorter than the other books? It might be the 343 era book with the strongest connection to game characters, so it's a good entry point for people who want a taste of the novels. Taking place in 2555 after the events of Halo 3 and the Kilo 5 trilogy, Halo Hunters in the Dark mainly follows two human researchers, Luther Mann, a xenoanthropologist obsessed with the Covenant, and his friend Henry Lamb, who has a similar level of fascination with the Foreigners. The two of them are working together, conducting research in the control room of Zeta Halo, or Installation 07, when they notice a countdown of about 35 days on some panels, and they can't seem to find a way to stop it. After escalating it in their research team, they learn the countdown has started on other rings, and it reaches the attention of high-level leaders like Lord Hood and Saren Osmond, who decide that the countdown could be signaling the firing of all 6 intact Halo installations. They contact the Arbiter and assemble a joint task force that will be sent through the portal, Envoy, to the Ark where they find the control room and cancel the countdown. Being knowledgeable researchers, Luther Mann and Henry Lamb are sent on the team, along with Spartan 4's Elias Holt and Frank Kodiak, some Marines, Sangheili expert Olympia Vale, and 2 elites, Nitho Srome and Utse Taham, who are the 2 elites that players 3 and 4 play as in the Halo 3 online campaign co-op. Now, ever since Arby got back from the Ark in 2553, the portal was damaged and no one could go through it either way, hence Chief getting stuck in space. Luckily, the Arbiter has found some Hergok, or engineers, which were a species created by the Foreigners to fix their technology. So, the Hergok fix the portal, and just as the exposition team is preparing to enter it, large Retriever Sentinels begin coming through it and attempting to mine Earth. After those are dealt with using Earth's defense fleet, the team heads for the Ark and need to overcome their own differences to accomplish their mission. Things start to feel a bit strange as the estimated travel time of multiple weeks through the portal, yes, that cutscene in Halo 3 of the trip to the Ark takes multiple weeks, finishes in a much shorter time, which means someone has fiddled with the portal aside from the engineers. Hunters in the Dark ranks low on interesting content to me. The opening is strong with the Sangheili and humans who fought each other for 30 years, constantly butting heads on how to handle the situation, but the tension kind of fades as time goes on, and it doesn't feel like there's a big moment that leads to the turnaround aside from one early in the book. You get to read about how humanity has started to rebuild Earth and its military after the war, as well as how the diplomacy between species and science has evolved a bit after the events of the Halo 5 trilogy. You get an introduction to one of Halo 5's characters, Olympia Vale, as well as some loose connections to Halo Primordium and Renegades with repeat characters like Captain Annabelle Richards, Dr. William Iqbal, and the ship the UNSC Rubicon. And for those that care for it, these two elites I mentioned earlier do get fleshed out with some backstory, and they are much cooler here compared to when they're being controlled by your friends in Halo 3 co-op. With the post-war era books up until this point being about rebuilding the galaxy and the alliances in it, Halo Last Light is our first look into a trend in the books for the next while. Post-war alliances have started to solidify, and many factions, mostly Oni and a lot of ex-Covenant baddies, are in an arms race for Forerunner technology. Taking place in late 2553, shortly after Halo Glasslands of the Halo 5 trilogy, this book follows the Spartans that were rescued from Onyx in that book, made up of Blue Team, consisting of Fred 104, Linda 058, and Kelly 087, the Spartan 3 Beta Company, consisting of Lucy B091 and Tom B292, and the Spartan 3 Gamma Company of Mark G313, Olivia G291, and Ash G099. The Spartans have been deployed with a research battalion on the planet Gao. Gao being a former human insurrectionist planet, before and during the Covenant War, the Spartans must be very careful not to upset anyone who is looking for any reason to fight the UNSC again. They're on the planet searching for a top secret piece of Forerunner technology, and that technology is contained in caves where they start finding freshly murdered human bodies. Because of those bodies, the Spartans are paired with Inspector Veda Lopez, a local homicide detective, to help them in the caves, kind of as an act of political cooperation between Gao and the UNSC. Veda's a smart woman, and she and her team of investigators are wary of why the UNSC is on Gao, and they become even more suspicious when she learns about the Gammas and their extreme augmentations that make them go nuts without proper inhibitive medication applied every few hours, which they call smoothers. All the while, a prominent anti-UNSC politician on Gao, Arlo Casil, is not happy that the UNSC has been allowed to stay on the planet, even for a short time, and begins questioning them more the longer they stay. If they refuse to leave, he has a new ally ready to fight on his side, the Keepers of One Freedom, a group of ex-Covenant religious fanatics led by a Jirohane or brute named Castor. And he's quite the intelligent ape, ready to play anyone he needs to in order to complete his dream of continuing the great journey. Last Light is a mystery novel for its first half, while the plot strongly focuses on Veda and her quest to find the killer in the caves. She has a great dynamic with the Spartans, especially Fred, who is the main character here if you had to pick one. This book does change into a more action-oriented ride after some of the killer's mysteries are revealed, but it's an interesting setup nonetheless. It is the continuation of Blue Team's story, but I wouldn't consider it to be the core Halo novel story anymore, since it's been split up so much. I should also clarify that this is the first book in a trilogy, with Halo Retribution and Halo Divine Wind following it, so it's more the start of Veda's story, and though I was skeptical of her character rivaling the Spartans at first, I'm very happy with her inclusion because I've grown a lot on her and what she adds to these stories across these 3 books. Anyway, if you want more Blue Team, a mystery novel, more on the UNSC colonial situation after the Human Covenant War, or want to know about this Forerunner tech they're searching for, go for Last Light. I should clarify that despite being a book about Blue Team that came out a month before Halo 5 Guardians release in the fall of 2015, there is absolutely no setup for Halo 5 in this novel. In fact, I don't feel that any of these novels present any significant setup for Halo 5. There is an introduction to Spartan Vale from Fireteam Osiris and Hunters in the Dark, and Buck's journey to becoming a Spartan 4 in New Blood, but the events of these books have no influence on how the characters behave in Halo 5, nor is there any exposition relating to Halo 5 like in the case of Halo Silentium relating to the Librarium and the Didact in Halo 4. If you want to find the setup for Halo 5, you could read the graphic novel Halo Escalation, which I have not read, watch Halo Nightfall, which I remember being astoundingly boring, or listen to the Hunt the Truth podcast, which was great but had nothing to do with Halo 5's final plot. What I mean to say is, you'll have trouble if you're searching for how this media relates to Halo 5 Guardians, so don't count on it. After this book, there isn't much game setup either, since 11 novels released between Halo 5 and Halo Infinite, and there's only so much setup for one game you can put in 11 novels. However, if there is any setup for Halo Infinite, I promise I'll do my best to point it out in this video and in the future. Halo Fractures is another anthology book just like Halo Evolutions. This book, Halo Fractures, is not to be confused with Fractures in Halo Infinite, which are non-canon events that deliver wacky armor to the game, like the Fractures Tenrai event. So Fractures in Halo Infinite are non-canon, but as far as I'm aware, each of the 14 stories told in Halo Fractures are canon to the Halo storyline, and most take place after the events of Halo 3, with the end of the Human Covenant War in 2553. So, unlike the first and current only other anthology book, Evolutions, Fractures takes multiple opportunities to set up stories for other upcoming Halo novels and expand off a few old ones. Because there are 14, you need to bear with me while I give you a quick setup for each of them. Lessons learned follows Spartan 3's Tom and Lucy after the events of Halo Last Light, including their involvement in a separate murder event that takes place in the background of Buck's story in New Blood. It sets up where Tom and Lucy are in Halo Legacy of Onyx. What Remains follows Evelyn Collins, a very minor character from Halo 5, who is trying to reorient herself after the planet's AI, Governor Sloan, abandons Meridian in ruins after he joins Cortana's regime. Just a note, this next one requires knowledge of many terms discussed in the Foreigner books, so if you haven't seen my last video, it may sound like a bit of gibberish to you. Promises to Keep follows the Foreigner Bornstellar in his final quest to reactivate the domain in preparation for future Reclaimers after it was damaged by the firing of the Halo arrays in Halo Solentium. He does this by traveling to the Foreigner capital world, Maithrillion, and negotiating with the resident AI or Ancella to fix it. Shadow of Intent is the longest of the stories and follows Sangheli Ratas Vadum, or Halfjaw, and his ship, the Shadow of Intent, that is protecting Sangheli colonies from ex-Covenant aggressors after the end of Halo 3. He meets his match when there's evidence of a prelate, a genetically altered Sanshayum, kind of like a Covenant Spartan, that has a grudge against the pro-Arbiter Sangheli and their civilian families. The Ballad of Hamish Beamish is a short poem about that picture of Frank O'Connor holding a broom in Halo the Master Chief Collection, and who that character is. Defender of the Storm is about a foreigner who's been stationed alone on a flying research facility on a gas giant in the middle of Flood-occupied space before the firing of the Halo array, questioning why he is there for an undefined period of time, and constantly fearing what will happen to him if the Flood shows up. Breaking Strain is about the remaining crew of a UNSC warship that crashed on an unfriendly colony world, where the crashing ship destroyed the power supply of the planet's only town, and the crew and residents of the town are just barely making it by each day without starting a massive shootout between the two groups. A Necessary Truth is a semi-prologue to Halo Retribution, the sequel to Halo Last Light, and it follows Veda Lopez and her new Spartan 3 team on an undercover training mission, which does not go very well. Into Fire is, as far as I'm aware, the exact first chapter from Halo Smoke and Shadow, so I will save my explanation for when I talk about that book next. Saint's Testimony is a story about the smart AI Iona from the graphic novel Halo Bloodline, in a court case arguing whether she should be decommissioned or not after her 7 years of active service come to an end. Roastback's World is about the head of Oni, Saren Osman, and her smart AI Black Box, both from the Kilo 5 trilogy, as well as Lord Hood, and what happens to the three of them after Cortana's hostile take over the galaxy at the end of Halo 5 Guardians. Oasis is about a young woman trying to desperately get supplies for her dying family by negotiating with the residents of a nearby Sangheli town on their desert planet that is jointly occupied by humans and elites alike after some post-war settlement complications arise. The characters here are not recurring, but the setting introduced here is set up for the events of Halo Envoy. Anna Rosa is about two Oni officers in their attempt to console a family whose sister recently died, while also trying to get their consent to donate her brain for the creation of a smart AI that will likely be used for military purposes. The final and 14th story is one that makes no sense until its last page, but the payoff for die-hard Halo book fans is great. So I'm not going to say anything about this story and let those who go in with the same knowledge set as me when I experienced it experience it for themselves. That was a lot, so I'll keep my pros and cons brief. None of these setup stories are necessary for the books they have links to. The highlights for me are Promises to Keep, Shadow of Intent, Oasis, Defender of the Storm, and the final one. I enjoyed the book quite a bit overall, and highly recommend it for any Halo fans deep into these books. However, Evolution serves its purpose much better for game-only fans or casual book enjoyers. It just doesn't make sense to read if you haven't read at least 6 or 7 other Halo books, since the characters and worlds have very few ties to the games, aside from Shadow of Intent. I should also mention that Saint's Testimony and Shadow of Intent are sold separately as ebooks if you'd prefer to read them that way. But again, I highly recommend it for Halo book or Extended Universe fans. Halo Smoke and Shadow is the shortest of the Halo novels, defined in the marketing as a novella and selling for a cheaper price, just like New Blood. The plot is about a human scavenger named Ryan in 2557 who went into her dangerous black market trade after she couldn't cope with her father's disappearance during the war. When she gets a tip from her business partner about a crashed and abandoned UNSC ship on an isolated moon, she and her crew of friends, Kip, Cade, Nico, and Les, start their hunt. When they find the ship, the tech is from over 25 years ago, and there is little of interest to them. That is, until Ryan reaches the bridge and finds a message that was sent to this ship and a group of others in the same battle group, namely the ship that housed her father, John Forge, at the time of his disappearance. With a clue of where she might be able to find them, Ryan and her friends get back aboard their craft and begin their galaxy-wide adventure to hunt down the UNSC Spirit of Fire. Those of us who played Halo Wars know that finding Sergeant Forge is a little bit complicated since he didn't escape the final chapter of that game with the Spirit of Fire, and the only people who know that are currently aboard the ship, which is floating aimlessly in unknown space and soon to be locked in a stalemate battle against Atriox and the Banished on the Ark, making this story a bit more interesting than just a MacGuffin hunt. On top of that, Ryan is in a race against the rival scavenger and former Covenant Shipmaster, Gek Lahar, to find that prize. I can only describe this one as fun. It's short, so it's hard to get into deep character development, but there is some good world building about civilian life in the post-Human Covenant War galaxy, an interesting main character, and a decent supporting cast. Much like New Blood, I'd recommend this to anyone who needs a lighter introduction to the 343 era Halo novels. The only piece of media necessary to understanding it is the first Halo Wars, but even that's not too necessary, and it's short. Again, it's fun, and the planet-hopping adventure of a scavenger strongly reminds me of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order's somewhat grim but ultimately lighthearted story. However, a tiny warning that its sequel, Halo Renegades, and Point of Light, although great, benefit from an understanding of the events of Halo Primordium and Silentium, respectively. That has been my thoughts on the 14th through 19th Halo novels. I hope that for those of you trying to get into reading these novels, that my perspectives have helped you choose which to look at. Whether you've read these books or not, I'd love to hear your perspectives on which you think you'll try reading, and which books you had some interesting thoughts about in your time reading them. One final disclaimer is that a lot of my perspectives come from my memories of reading these books, which I tried to back up using wiki articles, but there may be tiny inaccuracies, so I apologize for those if you catch any. My plan is to continue making these videos, probably releasing the 5th or 6th after I read Halo, the Rubicon Protocol, when it comes out this summer, and then maybe after that I'll transition into doing them one book at a time, or perhaps my quest will end there. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that you've been able to find some useful information in this video, and I'll see you again when we look at the books from 2017 onwards.